Hello, I'm Simon Bowes, and this is the Net Hero podcast. But before we start, check out the brand new futurenetzero.com. We've completely revamped the website platform. It has an extra 2 areas that will really help you out. One is the index, which is an index of technologies to help you understand what's out there right now to help your business or local authority or public sector organization make the difference. Technologies made simple. And the second is our learning toolkit that will help any business go from zero knowledge to getting their carbon footprint and beyond. Our aim is to help you take action, put net zero in action with our new platform. The podcast, of course, continues to go from strength to strength, so make sure you keep subscribing. We want to tell your stories, big or small, doesn't matter who you are. If you're a business, you're an academic, you're a campaigner, if you're doing anything that's trying to help us cut our emissions, come and tell your story on the Net Hero podcast. Now, on to this week's episode. Plastic. Plastic, fantastic. I remember there was a great song by Crowded House, all about plastic. And it's one of those things that has become quite polarizing when really it shouldn't be. Plastics have been one of the greatest inventions of humanity. They've changed medicine, they've changed the way we store food, they've changed the way we've transported things in a way that no one could believe. But, of course, they have an environmental impact. And over the last probably 5-10 years, they've become, in some eyes, a very bad thing. But is that really the case? The issue with plastics is that if you kind of know the basics of it, it nearly all comes from the hydrocarbon or the fossil fuel industry. It's a type of kind of chemical that is made from the raw materials that come from oil and gas. Yes, we make them into products, but then what happens when those products reach the end of their life? Recycling plastics is another big topic, and if you've been reading the press lately, you'll see lots of backlash against recycling. So what's the truth? How do we make sure we can use plastics, which are vital? We saw that during the pandemic, but also make sure that they're not destroying the environment as much as they are right now. Well, that's the subject of today's podcast, and I'm delighted to say that I'm speaking to a plastics expert. I'm joined by Adela Putinelu from a company called Plastic Energy, and you're the head of policy. Is that right, Adela?
Yes.
What is Plastic Energy? What do you do?
Thanks for inviting me. So we're a company who works as a technology provider in the space of chemical recycling, advanced recycling. We're headquartered in London, and we operate 2 recycling facilities in Spain, and currently expanding our technology, building new plants in Netherlands and France, and also active in the Asian market.
And in terms of your size, I mean, do you take clients that are small and big? Do you work with manufacturers, or are you just taking plastics from, the general waste pathway?
Yeah, so the way chemical recycling works is that we provide the technology, and we work in collaboration with petrochemical companies. So chemical recycling is quite different compared to mechanical recycling. The business model is also quite different. So we recycle post-consumer plastic waste, so the type of plastic waste that is used by the consumer and then collected at curbside collection. We recycle plastic waste that is not normally recycled through mechanical recycling means, which is mostly plastic film and flexible packaging that currently goes into a landfill, it goes into incineration. So we take that plastic that's normally considered of low value, and we create a very valuable product that we then sell to petrochemical facilities, who can then integrate this in the production of new plastics.
I want to go and explore that a little bit later, but let's go back a step for the viewers and listeners. Plastic, as I said, has been around a long, long time. Can you explain the basics of how plastic is made at present? And then when it's actually made into products, what the difference is between plastics that we can recycle and that are non-recyclable, the ones you look at. So how do we make plastics in the first place? What does it come from? I said at the beginning in the intro, it just comes from oil, but that's a kind of like layman's view of it. Tell me how it works.
Yeah, so petrochemical companies actually use sort of the byproducts of oil refining. So they would use fossil naphtha in the production of plastics and other valuable chemicals that we use every day. So that's being done through petrochemical facilities as steam crackers. These produce monomers, which then get transformed into polymers, and then other companies such as plastic converters would work on actually converting the polymers into the plastic products that we normally see in our everyday lives, the plastic packaging that we use, all the sort of stuff that we use every day. I think part of sort of the issue of the crisis on plastic waste that we currently are trying to solve is that we have become as a society very, very good at producing lots of different plastic.
Flipping out. Yeah, I mean, how much plastic? There's so much.
Lots of different plastic polymers.
Yeah.
And that really is sort of, on one hand, it has been very good to offer us the sort of functionalities that we need in plastic packaging, in our computers, in our phones, in
Yeah.
our cars. That has worked really good, right? I think obviously, as we tackle a lot of different environmental problems, we have to figure out how to deal with the amount of waste that is being generated through the use of these different types of plastics. I think one of the very visible sort of aspects of the plastic waste crisis is the plastics we use in packaging, because obviously that's sort of used for a very short amount of time. It's being discarded very rapidly after its use.
Yeah.
And normally the recycling infrastructure kind of struggles, to be able to process, to recycle these types of plastics. It also kind of confuses the consumers a lot, right? I don't know if you ever had conversations with friends on what do you put in the recycling bin? How does it work? Is this plastic? Is it not?
Oh, plenty. I'm boring as hell. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I
And
just wanted to take a step back. So if I saw this, you called it NAFTA. What does NAFTA mean?
yeah, so it's a byproduct of the oil and gas production that's used in,
Right. So if I saw this stuff, would it look like a liquid? Would it look like people know what oil looks like? Was it look like a gooey
yeah, similar
material?
to an oil, yes.
Right. So when the companies take this stuff and they make it, I'm talking to you right now through a camera, and that's got a plastic hood around it, obviously. There's plastic on this microphone here. There's a plastic, as you say, on the computer. And there's these hard plastics that we all use, and they go on for ages. And then you talk about the soft plastics. Is it as simple as that, that kind of the hard ones have longer life, and then there's better ways to break them down? Or does it, you said earlier, God, we've made so many different kinds, and it's so true. We've got so many different kinds. Even from when I was a kid, how much plastic has changed. I used to have injections; they were in glass. Now everything's plastic tubes for that. Is it a simple thing for us to understand? That, oh, actually, hard plastic easy to recycle, soft isn't, or is it just really difficult to explain in a very simple way?
Yeah, it's not necessarily very straightforward. I think normally consumers are used to the sort of plastics that are normally in packaging.
Yeah,
So for that, we are quite advanced in the sense that we've built sort of, recycling rules. We have curbside collection. Consumers.
we do. Yeah, my plastic water bottles and all of those things we see, absolutely. Milk bottles, they all say, can be recycled, don't they, on them?
Exactly. So some of those types used in packaging are collected at curbside collection. So if we look at the way it works in the UK, for example, some of the plastics we use in packaging and also in all sorts of, cosmetic products, things like that, can be collected through your normal curbside collection. However,
Right.
not all of them. So what
Mm.
normally happens is because councils, for example, in the UK, will have different rules around what they collect in the first place.
Yes, like plastic toys, for example. I've got a little one, and his old toys, if they're broken and I can't give them away, I think, oh, I'll put it in the recycling. But I don't know if it does go to recycling.
Exactly. The issue is that hopefully the government at the moment will get to a stage where we will have a uniform sort of collection system where, all consumers in the UK, all households will be able to put the same stuff in the recycling bin, right?
Yeah.
The same types of plastic waste so that there's less confusion. So we're, hopefully getting there in terms of trying to provide a very easy system for consumers to understand in the first place what is being, put in the curbside collection system. And the idea is to have also, the necessary recycling capacity, the necessary recycling infrastructure, and the technologies to be able to recycle more types of plastic waste than we currently do. And this is where the sort of process that we use at Plastic Energy comes into the already existing recycling infrastructure that is mainly mechanical infrastructure that deals well with PET, deals well with other types of plastic.
That's it, PET. That's what I was looking for. I don't know what that stands for, but PET can be recycled. Is that right?
PET is one of the sort of, you would say, success stories in terms of
Right.
recycling because it is a polymer that can be easily recycled through mechanical recycling. And mechanical recycling is also able to put PET back into PET, so a plastic bottle that's made with recycled content from another plastic bottle.
So is PET, you talk about, sorry to interrupt you, but you talk about mechanical recycling. Is that just chopping it up? What is mechanical? And I'll talk about chemical in a moment, but what's mechanical recycling?
Yeah, so it's the type of the traditional sort of recycling technology that everybody's used to. You melt the plastic and you regranulate it. And it works well for PET, for example, because you can put PET back into, you can put it back into a plastic bottle. It doesn't work as well for other types of plastic waste where you have issues with the properties of the polymer waste, you have issues with contamination. So for example, for polyolefins, which is a big part of the plastic packaging, which is polyethylene, polypropylene, the flexible packaging that you see in just packets and film and bags.
Yes, yeah.
It's not possible at the moment to use mechanical recycling to recycle this and put it back into the same sort of crisp packet, right? So this is exactly where we focus on because we're able to do that. And sort of if you take a step back and you're thinking, well, what can be currently mechanical recycled, you continue to do that, you scale that up, and then what you can't, you use chemical recycling, the sort of process that we use, and then you're able to recycle much more of the plastic that we're generating in the first place. So that's sort of the big picture, and that's where we want to get to.
I don't know if you know this, but what sort of percentage of plastic do we actually recycle? Is it hard? Because you get different figures all over the place.
I think in UK at the moment, it's around 46% of the plastic packaging that we generate, we recycle. However, a part of that, unfortunately, is being still exported to other countries, and we are
That's
not
exactly it.
quite sure
Yeah.
about how that works. And the idea is really to sort of reduce that reliance on plastic waste exports and being able to recycle as much as we can locally using local infrastructure.
This has been the problem, isn't it? That a lot of consumers have lost a bit of faith, is they think they're putting it in, they're trying to do their bit, and then they see, a container with all this stuff being shipped off to sort of South China or somewhere like that, and then it's either melted or shoved in landfill, whatever like that. And I think there's an industry issue there which needs to be looked at. As a consumer, you're a consumer yourself, it's confusing, isn't it, for us? Because I think most people would say, particularly with awareness, the rule on plastic bags, no one complains now. People bring their own bags. People have been cutting down, I have 2 bins at home. I never would have had that 5 years ago, let alone, think about 10, 15 years ago. So I'm conscious, you look at our food packaging, much more of it's cardboard in takeaway places and things like that. So people are starting to see that. But for the consumer, it's very hard, isn't it, to say, oh, I've done my bit because it's going to be recycled.
Yes, exactly. I think it's really confusing for the consumers, and I think that is sort of the first thing that we need to think about and change that, because in reality, consumers don't really need to understand all of these very complicated issues around the production process, around the use life, around the environmental impact. What they do need to understand is what to do with the plastic that they use at the end of life. And that's where the rules should be quite clear for the consumer to be able to, adopt and be incentivized to do the right thing. Because the more complicated you make it for the consumer, the more most probably you're not going to get the behavior that you want to get from the consumers, right? So I'm a huge advocate for simplifying the rules for recycling for the consumers to be able
Yeah.
to make the right choice without that being daunting.
I don't know whether you know this again. Sorry, I'm treating you like a plastic expert, but hey, you are. So, but I mean, for example, right? Offices. We often change things in offices, and we often have to throw away old computers. I always wonder, they put them in the recycling bin. Can the plastics casing around a computer be recycled, for example, let alone the stuff that's inside it? For business waste, it's a very big part of the cost for a business is getting rid of the waste. Again, do you think there's a lot of confusion out there, but for commercial customers about what they can get rid of and where it goes?
Yeah, I think it is. I'm not very familiar with things outside of sort of plastic packaging where I was focusing on for a
Yeah.
very long amount of time. But I think obviously there needs to be sort of, the same simplification of what we discussed about be applied in other
It would make a difference, wouldn't it? It'd be so easy to say, okay, I know where this is going, and this is what's with. Why do you think there's not been that information out there? Is it just because it's just complicated, or the plastic industry hasn't volunteered it, or government hasn't made it clear? We just be told to recycle. That's it.
It's because of all of these issues, really. And I think mainly, and consumers weren't necessarily incentivized in the past to be able to adopt the right
Yeah.
behaviors. Quite frankly, governments haven't been that good until, recently to actively make this part of their, the part of the policies that they look into. Businesses haven't been
Yeah.
proactive at it at
Yeah.
all. I don't think the industry was proactive in the past at all. So it's
No.
really a combination of all of these factors. But I think the landscape is very quickly changing, and that's very, very good to see.
So, in terms of what you do at Plastic Energy, you'll go and take the things that at present, not the PETs, these other things that can't be recycled at present. And the difference is, you talked about earlier mechanical, you sort of melt it, but you sort of break the thing apart to the constituent kind of molecules at the beginning. Is that it? And I'm being very bad with my science here, but what's the difference? What is this chemical process different to this kind of melting process that people can understand?
Yeah, sure. So I think in broad terms, mechanical recycling does not change the chemical structure of the polymeric waste, right?
Right.
Whereas chemical recycling does exactly that. So the polymeric waste gets transformed into a hydrocarbon oil. So you sort of switch back the chemistry a little bit to go back to some of its component sort of chemical structures. So you obtain a hydrocarbon oil, and the way you obtain this is by heating the plastic waste in the absence of oxygen to obtain this hydrocarbon oil. And this is what we've been doing ever since 2016 and 2017 with the two recycling plants in Spain. And the main sort of the target plastic waste feedstock that we put in the recycling process is the polyolefinic waste that I've talked about. So that's polyethylene, polypropylene, the sort of stuff that's mainly plastic, flexible films, packaging, crisp packets, plastic bags, things like that. These at the moment are not recycled at all.
Right.
Mechanical recycling doesn't really deal with it. It ends into incineration, landfill.
That's amazing, isn't it? Because we've had such a big fuss about plastic bags and government policy. And Chris, you're right. They've got silver foil inside them. I don't know if it's metal or if it's plastic, what the hell it is. So these things, when you take it back down, what you're doing, and correct me if I'm wrong, is by taking that plastic and taking it back to the base sort of chemical, you can reuse it to make new plastic, which means you don't need to go and get new oil and gas base material. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, exactly. So the sort of recycling process that we have just has a lot of advantages, right? But I'm just going to focus on outlining two of them. So first of all, we provide a solution for plastic waste that has no solution to be recycled at present time. So that's a big sort of part of reducing the environmental impact. You're recycling it. And the second one is by recycling that and using it to create new plastic, you're automatically sort of, displacing the use of virgin oils in the production of plastic. So it has, several advantages. It also sort of directly helps the petrochemical industry to decarbonize, right? A big part of the petrochemical industry's sort of environmental impact is, the amount of energy, the amount of virgin resources that are being used to produce chemicals, to produce plastics as well. So if the petrochemical industry has alternative feedstocks like the hydrocarbon oil that we provide to them,
they don't need to go and get a new oil field. They don't have to go and get more stuff out the ground.
Yeah, exactly. So they can use waste essentially to replace, the virgin oils that they're used to producing new plastics. So that's a huge environmental advantage that we have to to play a part in generally tackling the many issues that we have around solving the plastic waste crisis.
How efficient is your process? How much of the waste becomes this base material? How much do you lose in the transfer?
So we use a part of the plastic waste feedstock because we generate energy for the process itself. So it's quite efficient in terms of using part of that feedstock to be able to produce the energy to use inside the process of recycling. And we've been doing a lot of studies around demonstrating the environmental advantages that our technology has over incineration, for example, to demonstrate, looking at, the amount of greenhouse gases you generate by incinerating these plastics, and then looking at what we do, how much is the greenhouse gas saving. And it is a really, really big improvement there. So the previous impact study that we did showed a 55% decrease in greenhouse gases by doing recycling compared to incineration, and a 65% when you compare it to the virgin plastic production. So it is really quite significant. We're working on updating this environmental impact study. Obviously, as time goes by, these things need to be updated. We're expecting even more reduction in carbon savings. It's quite important, and it's also important to mention that this is just sort of the beginning. We're operating since 2016, 2017. We are very confident that we're able to improve the process as we gather more operational experience.
Right. So to become more efficient. But I mean, 50%, 60% savings on the emissions is big stuff already. In terms of maybe you don't have that figure, but in terms of kind of how much of the actual waste gets remade, would you say like 70%, 50% of the waste becomes the base material? Because obviously some of it, you said, goes into powering the conversion. Do you have a figure for that at all?
Yeah, so at the moment, the yield that we're working on is around 70%. It also depends a lot on plastic waste input. So, for example, things like contamination, how contaminated it is, the different plastic waste feedstock characteristics. So that sort of impacts the yield, and we're able to sort of work with those parameters to obtain a higher yield and a lower environmental impact over time, and be able to demonstrate that with scientific studies as well.
In terms of efficiency, so starting off with the kind of unrecycled material, how much of that, obviously you said some of it goes into the process of making this. What sort of yield do you get of the base material from the starting point?
So we're currently working around 70% yield. So this is what we can currently do. And the yield is also quite impacted by the quality of the plastic waste that we feed into the process in the first place. So things like contamination play a part. And we're able to sort of work with these parameters throughout time, ever since we're operational, to improve the yield and also to decrease the environmental impact of the process itself, and be able to demonstrate that with scientific studies.
And so Are there crisp packets now that we're going to get? If I buy my crisp packet tomorrow, hopefully, I'm trying not to have too many, but it might be one that's come from this recycled process. I mean, are there products being made right now using the process that you guys have been putting into place for the last couple of years?
Yeah, that's probably the most important sort of question, right? And that's why we do the work that we do, right? There is actually a new crisp packet from
Ah,
PepsiCo, an FMCG company we currently worked with to integrate this recycled oil into the production of plastic packaging. So the latest example is a collaboration between INEOS, Green Dot, ourselves, and PepsiCo for integrating recycled content into PepsiCo plastic packaging into a crisp
right.
packet.
Yeah.
That's one of the latest examples. However, we've been sort of gathering a lot of experience in this space. So we've got more than 10 different products that have been commercialized with recycled content from our facilities. And that's different types of.
And these are all packaging products, are they?
We only focus on plastic packaging. So
Right.
it's different types of plastic packaging that are being sold by FMCG brands in supermarket shelves. There were previous examples of Heinz Snap Bean pots, Magnum ice cream.
Oh,
Yeah, different types of plastic packaging. And it's really, yeah, that's why we're really proud of the work that we do, right? Because you can see that.
it's coming to me again. I can see it. For me, that is proper recycling. That I throw it in the bin, you do your stuff, and it comes back on my new ice lolly or as my new packet of crisps. I mean, that is the holy grail, isn't it? That it is circular.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's why I'm very passionate about the work that I do, and everybody here at Plastic Energy is very, very passionate about the stuff that we do, right? Because it's very important, and we've been the world leaders in this space. We're the only company that has managed to really demonstrate the whole complete loop of this recycling process, from recycling the plastic waste down to putting it into plastic packaging that is being sold and commercialized on supermarket shelves. And these kinds of examples are, the circular economy in practice, right? So it's really important to, yeah, continue the work that we do in the future, and that will, have a knock-on effect on us being able to play a small but important part in the plastic waste.
I think the thing before we end, one thing that's really interesting is, I really like what you're doing, and I thought the story was brilliant. Garima, our researcher, found it, and I thought it's good because I said right at the beginning we can't live without. There is a group out there that just hate plastic, and I don't know why, because they just think we can't do it. But I always say, imagine the pandemic without plastic, right? Imagine what we would have done for taking tests and doing things and masks and everything that goes into it. And then you look at things like packaging for food. Do you think what you're trying to do here kind of helps get rid of that narrative that plastic is bad? What's bad is the emissions. What's bad is the waste. What's bad is the fact that we can't recycle all of it. But the actual plastics themselves, they do a lot of good, don't they?
They do. They actually do. I think a lot of people tend to forget the fact that, yeah, you have a lot of utility from using, plastic waste in your everyday life. The plastic in the cars makes cars lighter, so you consume less fuel. There's a lot of stuff like that we don't necessarily think about. The hygiene aspect, like you mentioned during COVID, a lot of stuff that normally we don't think about. I think plastics have also become sort of, an enemy because it's a very visible environmental problem, right?
It is. We see the patch in the Pacific, and no one wants to see that, and it looks disgusting, and everyone just gets a very visceral reaction towards plastic, don't they?
Yeah, exactly. And I think of climate change and greenhouse gases, for example. If you were able to see that, to see all of the greenhouse gases and how they contribute, we don't see that, right? Like if
Yeah,
you were able to see that, maybe we would have been better at, solving that until now. I don't know. But plastic waste, that's the issue, right? It's very, very visible. And I think
yeah,
that's a big part of why people love to hate plastic, right?
yes,
I
yeah.
think we need to understand that we have to manage the issues related to the plastic waste in a way that we're able to keep the functionality and to keep the good parts about plastic in the first place. And I think recycling is a very important part of that, but it's only a part of solving this issue, right? We do have to get better at making reuse easy for consumers as well. Working on the business case for reuse generally, I think that's a very important part of us being, less reliant on the big amount of plastic production that we have, right? So there are different solutions to the problem, and I think recycling is a very important part of it. It is not the only thing that we need to focus on, right? So we need to look at like the sort of the whole picture and reinventing
Yeah.
how we use and discard of plastic waste.
I think what you've been doing and what Plastic Energy are doing is very innovative. I assume you're trying to scale and do more. You say you've got 2 plants. What's the sort of ambition in the next few years?
We're focusing at the moment on opening more plants. So we have 2 that are close to being operational. One is in Netherlands. It's a joint venture in collaboration with SABIC, which is a petrochemical producer, and the other one in France, which is a joint venture with Total. So focusing on bringing these operational in the next years. Also, this licensing is becoming an important part of our business model. So we work with petrochemicals companies around the world that can license the sort of technology that we've developed for them to be able to build their own plants. So it's really focusing on increasing the number of operational plants at the global level.
What about one here in the UK? Are there any plans here? Or is it just you're doing it in Europe and then it eventually gets to us through the products? Or what's the plan for anything specific for the UK?
With the right opportunity, yes, for sure. I think we have been focusing more on Europe because we do tend to see more clarifications in terms of the policy landscape, and that has an knock-on effect on the commercial case, the investment case, right? So policy is really, really important, and we do see that things are a bit more clear at the moment in Europe. And yeah, it's no wonder that we've been focusing with our operations more in Europe. However, that doesn't mean that we're not looking at the UK as well. We are based here. The technology headquarters is based in London. So we're hoping that we will be able to open up a plant here as well.
I look forward to my milk bottles being the ones I threw out yesterday. That's a good way to do it. And my crisp packets and everything else, cling film, the whole lot, whatever I'm using, that is the dream, that it's all ending up back in my hands in the future. Thank you so much for your time. I think it's really good stuff what you're doing. Check it out, Plastic Energy. Adela, thank you for joining us on the Net Hero podcast.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
My pleasure. What's your thoughts on plastic and this new process? I think it's very clever. I think it's smart. Tell me your views. Get in touch. You can email us, nethero@futurenetzero.com. Get in touch on social media. Make sure you subscribe, and I'll catch you on the next episode.
You've just heard the Net Hero podcast from futurenetzero.com. Join us as we help you find ways to cut your carbon footprint as we head towards net zero. Subscribe and follow us on social media. futurenetzero.com. Better business, better planet.